Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. The paradigm I want to share today concerns Christianophobia and the media. Now, you may or may not have heard of or seen my video on Christianophobia in general, or seen my video on Christianophobia in academia. And that's fine. Christianophobia is an unreasonable hatred and fear of Christians, especially conservative Christians. If you want more on that, you can look at my basic video on Christianophobia and get more of a background on that. One of the things I concluded is that people with cultural power are more likely to have Christianophobia. And the media qualifies for that. There's research that shows that people in the media tend to be well-educated, tend to be white, male, characteristics associated with Christianophobia, also tend to be progressive, irreligious, also qualities associated with Christianophobia. A lot of Christians complain about the media. They complain about how the media is unfair to them. So let's look at that, because you can't just look at a single story or event and say, oh, look, they did a bad job on this, they're biased. You have to look at something a little bit more systematic. I did some research on this. I'm not just looking at just Christianophobia, but also racism and sexism and other types of issues. And a book I did with a colleague called Is There Prejudice in the Press? We wrote that book looking at media bias. And one of the areas in media bias was religion. Now, the way we did our research was we did what's called an audit study. We sent a survey out to a lot of people in the media, and we gave them two versions of the same story. And the idea is that if half of the people get one version and the other half get a different version, do they treat the story differently? We gave them the story, we asked them what the story run, what would they emphasize in the story, and how important the story was. So, two of our scenarios relate to Christianophobia. I want to show them to you and then talk to you about the reaction of the media to them. The first scenario is what I would call the church shooting scenario. And you can see it. It talks about a church. I won't read it word for word because that's boring, but you can read it for yourself. We interjected Springfield Baptist Church and Islamic Center of Springfield. So half the respondents got the Baptist Church, the other half got the Center of Springfield. You can see that a man comes in, shoots up the church, is killed, two people die. What sort of story would be run in this circumstance? Now, a couple of things. First, the Islamic shooting was seen as a hate crime. When the reporter said, oh yes, this is a story to run, it's because it's a hate crime. Second, the Baptist shooting was not seen as a hate crime. And oftentimes, what the reports are talking about is, this is an example of what happens when we don't have gun control. Or, we have a problem with violence, but not a hate crime. This is a telling difference, because the hate crime denotes a sort of victimization that the Muslims receive that the Christians are not receiving. I think the second scenario is even more telling. It's the hate speech scenario. Let's take a look at that. You can see, once again, I'm not going to read it word for word, but you can read it for yourself. We interchanged whether the professor said hateful things to the LGBT community or hateful things about conservative Christians. A student made a recording and was disturbed by an epitaph during the rant. The teacher, the student's available for interview. The teacher will not make herself available for interview. Do you do a story on this? Here, the respondents, and these are media respondents, these are people in the media who are respondents, I should be clear about that. They were more likely to make a story when it was a story against the LGBTQ community than against the Christians. They often said that when it's about the Christians, this is free speech. Why should I care? It's free speech. And rarely did they think it was a real story. Maybe some hostility. When it was the other version of it, it was hate speech. How could this professor Some of them said, how can this professor still be working there? The professor needs to be fired. It's pretty self-evident how these two reactions to two stories that are alike for one change. If there's hate speech done against Christians, that's free speech. If hate speech done against sexual minorities, it's hate speech and the person should be fired. Now you may be saying, well, aren't Christians the majority? And I would tell you to go to my video on Christianophobia and look at why that's not a good answer for this. That is not what we really want in our society. Yes, there is bias in the media. I believe there's bias in the media. I don't think it's intentional, but the interpretation of stories is driven by a type of attitude where the interests of conservative Christians is less important to the media than other groups defined as oppressed groups. I think it's pretty clear from these examples that that's there. Now, is it getting better through alternative media? We've always had alternative media. That's not new. The alternative media that's emerging, though, what's interesting is it doesn't tend to be Christian alternative media. Joe Rogan is not a Christian, right? Ben Shapiro is not a Christian. So while this alternative media may be more sympathetic to Christians, may see conservative Christians as kind of be on their side in the way that they vote, and I'm not saying that conservative Christians all vote for Republicans or anything like that. They may be more sympathetic, but they're not Christians. And so I think their sympathy is only going to go so far. Christians can and should develop their own media, but we need to be aware that there is Christianophobia there, and some of our concerns are well justified. Does this shatter some paradigms for you? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you already suspected this. Maybe this confirms it, gives you evidence of this. And if you want, pick up the book. I post a link to it. You can pick up the book and read it. The book's not just about Christianophobia. I'm warning you right now. It's about other types of isms. But there is a chapter on this topic of Christianophobia. If this shares some paradigms for you, that's good. We should be aware of what's really happening. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please give me a like. If you want to see more content, please subscribe. Give me a comment. Tell other people about it. This is what gets me excited about doing more and more of these videos. So if you want to see more and more of these videos, then doing those things will encourage me. Because I'm like anyone else. I can use the encouragement. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. And I hope you come back and come visit me as we shatter some more paradigms.